What's up guys, it's Aaronitmar. You know, game companies are always recycling or reusing content if they can, whether it's a tech demo that gets turned into a full game or just a concept that has been scrapped but then brought back. If they spent man hours on it, game companies are 100% going to find a way to use it. And you know, I want to use that philosophy, so I'd like to announce my brand new book. It'll be on store shelves soon. I hope you guys will buy it.
The year was 2005, and some monumental events were happening. This little website called YouTube was founded, I was in the 5th grade, and Banjo-Pilot was released for the Game Boy Advance. Like Grunty's Revenge before it, Banjo-Pilot was developed by Rare and published by THQ. But that wasn't always the plan. In fact, Banjo-Pilot wasn't even meant to be a Banjo-Kazooie game in the first place. But if you looked at the gameplay and thought, hey, that looks familiar, you'd be right. The game looks very close to the flight sections found in Diddy Kong Racing for the Nintendo 64. Diddy Kong Racing was also developed by Rare, and it's in the running for one of the most beloved racing games of all time. And I think you see where I'm going with this, because Banjo-Pilot was originally developed to be a sequel to Diddy Kong Racing called Diddy Kong Pilot, a game which fully focused on planes in an attempt to stand out from kart racers, which were all the rage those days. The game would be considerably stripped down from its N64 predecessor as well. While Diddy Kong Racing had a pretty good single-player campaign accessed through a large hub world, Diddy Kong Pilot is largely focused on Grand Prix races accessed through menus, like Mario Kart has always been. A demo of Diddy Kong Pilot was even playable at E3 2001. Mechanically, the game was pretty unique for its time. Rather than controlling your plane through the usual up, down, left, right, the cartridge was planned to have accelerometer technology built in, so when you tilted your Game Boy, the plane would actually move based on your gestures. But this concept, while definitely neat, had a few drawbacks. One repeated complaint the demos had was that the LCD screen of the original Game Boy Advance was only well lit when angled a certain way at a light source, an issue that any old school Game Boy owner knows all too well. So, moving the console around to control your character made it incredibly hard to see the gameplay, something that may have potentially been solved by the future Game Boy Advance SP's lit screen, but at the time was incredibly difficult to play on. Another problem is that the technology was just kind of inaccurate. Those who played the demo said that it wasn't very responsive to their movement, frustrating players far more than enhancing their experience. So ultimately, the motion control concept was scrapped, which is actually kind of a shame because in just a few years' time, the Wii would come out and effectively perfect that kind of control scheme. At this point in development, things became very hectic for the team working on this game. Nintendo was insisting on an unrealistic release date, and Rare higher-ups were requesting features that simply weren't doable on the hardware. An anonymous programmer years later would recall all of this while stating he believed the game should have simply been cancelled. Despite this though, development slowly chugged along. But now let's briefly jump forward literally a decade to 2011. An alleged former Rare employee posted on YouTube footage of the earliest build of Diddy Kong Pilot, dated September 7th, 2001. Other videos would follow, and eventually the entire game itself would be sent, completely playable, to a Rare fan site. This version is super rough. There are some very clear bugs, and the game actually boots straight into the debug menu, which is something that's only meant to be seen by developers. We can also see some interesting cut content from this game, including the initial plan to have Mario characters be a part of the roster, and the introduction of a brand new Kong, Crappy Kong or Redneck Kong, who was removed for unknown reasons. But not only did a 2001 version of the game get released, but a 2003 version was also posted. Again from that former Rare employee known only as Transparent Jinjo, video footage was posted to YouTube of an entirely redone build of Diddy Kong Pilot, apparently from February 2003. And once again, this build would later be sent to another Rare fan site, and it is currently accessible and fully playable to this day. And this version of the game is nearly 99% complete. The tracks, game modes, music, characters, it's all pretty much finished. There were a few minor bugs and glitches that needed to be ironed out, but overall the game was nearly complete. In fact, you can even find some, questionably legal physical carts available online. Diddy Kong Pilot is pretty faithful to the controls for the plane sections from Diddy Kong Racing, and it translated pretty well for the Game Boy Advance. A is for accelerate, B uses your item, or if you don't have one, will simply shoot a dart gun, left and right control your turning, up and down control your height, R is for making all the blood rush to your head, and L performs tricks combined with a direction, like a barrel roll or a loop-de-loop. And as you'd expect, throughout the race you can use items that are picked up from item barrels. Pink buzzes can be thrown forward to home in on the nearest opponent, blue buzzes target themselves to hit the player in first place, zingers are dropped behind the player as an obstacle to avoid, hovering up and down, TNT barrels give the player a huge boost of speed, wrench barrels hit the other racers with lightning and make them dizzy, and finally, Rambi the Rhino maxes out the player's speed and makes them invincible for a short time. There were also Kong letters scattered around the track that you could collect. However, in the 2003 build of the game, there wasn't any applied function to them. You'd collect them and nothing would happen. The earlier 2001 build of the game actually saw the return of some items used in Diddy Kong Racing. The rockets, rocket boost, and magnet were all brought over, as well as the addition of watermelons, eggs, and peanuts. Every item that worked in the 2001 build of the game were basically reskinned into the items that we got in the 2003 build of the game. They effectively worked the same in function. And the characters you start off with are who you'd expect: Donkey Kong, Diddy, Dixie, and Funky. You unlock more characters the way you'd also expect by playing through the single player. There are 4 cups, each consisting of 4 tracks. After placing high enough in the cup, you'll take on the boss in a weird one-on-one sequence where you whittle down each other's health using items or darts. On a brand new save file, each boss is a different Kremling before you finally get to K. Rool himself in the final cup. After you complete all of the cups, Cranky Kong bets that you couldn't do it as a Kremling, in which you then get to play Kremling-Pilot, where you can go through all of the cups again, but instead use the Kremlings as your actual character, while fighting against the Kongs as the cup bosses. This is kind of a neat way to signify unlocking characters. When you complete Kremling-Pilot, you're gonna want to go ahead and complete Cranky challenges, similar to the silver coin challenges from Diddy Kong Racing. Completing all of these challenges allows you to play as Cranky Kong as a racer. They surprisingly managed to cram a ton of personality into this small game. I mean, Cranky being all 4 slots on his character select screen, that's hilarious, and that's totally in character for him. But as I said, tragedy would strike for this game. Throughout the development hell, Rare was acting as a second-party developer to Nintendo, but in 2002, Microsoft infamously purchased Rare outright. However, Microsoft was totally okay with Rare continuing development of games on Nintendo's handhelds. Microsoft themselves didn't have any kind of competing handheld in the market, so it was nothing but gain for their new developer to continue creating games on that platform. The only issue is that Rare doesn't own the characters from Donkey Kong. As a second-party developer, Nintendo allowed them to use the Kongs, and Rare is largely responsible for the direction and style that the series took and still has to this very day. But now that they were under different management, neither Microsoft nor Nintendo would probably want Rare to use these characters. So the game went back to the drawing board again. But Rare higher-ups had a that's-so-Raven vision and saw that it would be easiest to just take what they'd already done and reskin it using Banjo-Kazooie characters. And that's exactly what they did. Every single character was reskinned in the game, even down to having the exact same number of characters in the final build. More changes need to be made as well, from changing the menu to slight gameplay tweaks, fixing that epic glitch, and reworking all of the tracks. While many tracks in Diddy Kong Pilot were Donkey Kong themed, they needed to be changed to be more Banjo appropriate. All told, the changes to the game took about 5 months, which is kind of impressive considering how much they changed. Aside from characters and tracks, Cranky's challenges were also totally reskinned, but they remain the same in function. The player must now collect 6 Jiggies rather than banana coins and still come in first place. If all challenges are completed, you unlock not Cranky Kong, but Bottles the Mole. The items also got entirely reskinned, but their functions are also exactly the same. Rambi became golden feathers, pink buzzes became fire eggs, you get the picture. And the Kong letters were now given an actual function. First, they've been reskinned to simply be music notes, and you can still collect 4 in each race. But these now work with the new way of unlocking characters. Rather than segmenting the game as a means for unlocking characters, you now simply unlock them in an in-game shop. For finishing races in high places, you'll get Cheeto pages, and the more music notes you collect, the more Cheeto pages you'll be rewarded with on top of that. You can then go to Cheeto in the menu and exchange these for additional racers and cups. And on top of all of these changes that had to be done in 5 months, the team also developed a quick and dirty version of the game that used an entirely different engine. And that version was also leaked online. I mean, we pretty much have the entire development history of this game archived on the internet. It's kinda crazy. Anyway, this different version had its merits, but overall it just felt off. The gameplay just felt weird at the end of the day, and on top of that, a full build of the game including items and obstacles would have caused the Game Boy Advance to lag, so the game fell back on the Mach 7 engine that it was already using. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same engine that was used for both F-Zero and Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo. Now with so much work behind it, this game just has to be incredible. So, how does it play? Alright, look, don't get me wrong, the game is definitely fun in bite-sized chunks, and that's definitely what handheld racing games were going for around that time. It just didn't do anything really groundbreaking. Okay, sure, it brought over the flight sections from Diddy Kong Racing, and that's cool, but in that game the flight sections actually meant something. In that game there were land, water, and air vehicles, so you actually had to change the way you thought depending on which track you were on. You can fly over or under obstacles, find a hidden item block in a place you almost had to explore to find mid-race, or even find a different path altogether. There just felt like there was an actual level of depth to those tracks that the Pilot game just doesn't capture. I mean, control-wise it works well, it just feels kind of pointless. Rather than a game that is enhanced by the ability to fly, it kind of just feels like Mario Kart, but now I have control over my height too. Overall, it's not a terrible game, it just doesn't wow me really in any aspect at all. It's definitely fun for a couple of cups, but after that, I've kinda had my fill for a while.
So that is the story of Banjo-Pilot, a fun little game that has a disproportionately interesting backstory to the final product that we got. But enough about that. Let's talk about my book, because that's what this video has all been about. I got my first fan letter, and I'm just excited to read it. So let's go ahead and... Well, subscribe.